Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Sensi. My name is Jay Sensi of Campus Kaizen. If you're tuning in for the first time, the gist of Sensi is I invite on an exciting guest from the industry. We have a pretty informal conversation, and the format is we'll do a little introduction, and then we'll ask each other three questions. Any topic goes, industry topic, personal topic, etc., and have an informal conversation, sharing some thoughts and insights and stories. I'm really excited to welcome this week's guest, Matt Unger, founder and president of Roompact. I'll let Matt share a little bit more about Roompact, but I've known Matt for, if you could believe it, Matt, it's been, I think, 8 years.
Wow.
I think Matt and I got introduced initially through a common colleague, Bill Unger, that set us up, I guess, on kind of like a blind date, if you will, in Orlando. I don't know if you remember this, Matt. I remember getting together with you. It was right before the AkuOI conference in Orlando. I think it had to be 2015. My wife was pregnant with Jerry at the time, which helped me timestamp that. But Matt and I got together and had a pretty similar path to growing our companies and have kept in touch ever since. And I'm really excited to welcome you to Sensi today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Jay. I actually can't believe it's been 8 years. I do remember meeting you in Orlando. And I think before that, I saw you at a business operations conference in Kansas City. So it's been a while for sure. And I remember meeting you in Orlando because you came and asked me to meet up or something. And I just I got to the point where I would roll my eyes when people did that because it fellow vendors, not from folks in the industry, fellow vendors, because people would ask and I'd always say, absolutely, I'll meet up with you. And they usually didn't follow through. And you were one of the first and one of the only to this point who actually followed through. So it was great to start that relationship.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm very thankful that it's turned into a friendship over that period. Matt, if you don't mind, I think a lot of people in the industry know what Roompact is and what you all do, but on the off chance that somebody doesn't, would you mind giving kind of the elevator pitch about Roompact?
Absolutely. So we are a software company and we focus on residence life and residential education in student housing. So back when we started, Roompact is more than 10 years old now. And I think back when we started, we didn't know exactly what we focused on. We focused on whatever people wanted us to. But nowadays, and for the past 5, 6, 7 years, we have definitely focused on providing folks in residence life with software that helps them with any of their internal processes. So we usually find that as far as res life goes, we're the day-to-day software that people use.
Excellent. All right, well, let's hop into the questions, man. So, just a real quick kind of recap on the format. Goal is we trade 3 questions apiece. Any topic goes and have hopefully what's a pretty cool conversation. You're my guest today, so I'm gonna let you have that first with the first question.
Sorry, can you hear me? You froze for a second.
Oh, did I? All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. Let me see if there's something. All right. Okay. Can you see me?
Gotcha now.
All right, sorry, Jay. Okay, my first question, and I'm very excited to hear the answer. You have been in the industry for, likewise, about 10 years, plus or minus, right? So you've come in with a roommate matching application, My College Roomie, and you've also gotten into student conduct. And then kind of the third pillar that you're getting into, you announced last month, I think, right around the AkuOI National Conference. And you released a video that kind of made some waves. And I'm wondering why you think it seems like that has struck such a chord with some folks in the industry.
Yeah. Very excited about MCR housing. I think it's something that the industry has been craving for some time, especially given the events and the acquisitions of the last 2 years or so. And quite frankly, I made the video because I think it had to be said. I think uh, it's what a lot of folks in the industry had been thinking and maybe talking about quietly. In fact, I had somebody at the Cool Light conference come up to the booth and say, you said the quiet part out loud, which gave me a lot of validation that what I said was accurate, and that others were sharing the same feelings. Um, and I just felt that, I've been in this industry for 10 years, similar to you and others that have been here quite a lot longer. I think would attest to this type of industry being much more of a tight-knit group, um, very high on camaraderie, very high on relationships. And I just felt that the last 2 years or so, a lot of that has gone by the wayside. As private equity and outside investment money came into at least the software space, and they've been there in other areas, but I just felt that a lot of that environment and relationship building got diluted, or was on a path to dilution. Um, and I didn't like the way that was going. I didn't like the feedback I heard from a lot of our clients. Um, a lot were, quite frankly, asking me to go build a housing software. And that's why I felt that the time was right. The industry was kind of ripe for it. And it was a bit of a gamble, right? I wasn't quite sure how people were going to take the announcement, first and foremost, as well as maybe the way that it was presented. And not everybody was happy about it, but you can't make an omelet without breaking a couple eggs. But I think for the most part, people have been very receptive, very positive, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this thing.
Awesome.
Great
Very
question.
exciting.
Great question.
I always root
Awesome.
for an underdog. I'll tell you that, Jay.
I tell people from near Philly, right? You know me, I'm a Philly sports fan. I identify with Philadelphia and the Rocky Balboa story. I feel like I've been an underdog since I came into the industry, and I love it. To quote the great Jason Kelsey of the Philadelphia Eagles, "Hungry dogs run faster," and I'm hungry, right? And I think when you've got a hunger and a passion, you can make really great things happen. So we'll see where we can take it.
Awesome.
All right. Um, what I want to start with, Matt, I'm going to start with kind of maybe an easy one for you. I feel like as vendors in the expo hall, a lot of folks see us as vendors and not always as humans that are, running companies and helping to, with our campus partners, helping them to grow and prosper and do things more efficiently. So I would like to use the first question to give folks a little snapshot of, who's Matt when he's not running Roompact, when he's not, shepherding the Roompact ship and growing and serving clients. Who's the guy behind the fox?
Technically, it's a wolf, but I'll let it
Oh,
go.
wolf. Sorry.
Uh,
You could go either way.
yeah. Um, I would say, in like 2 words, my response would be family man. So I love spending time with my kids. I love spending time with my wife. And in my neighborhood, I'm known as the guy with the kids. If I ever meet
Hmm.
anybody and they don't really recognize me, I'll say I'm the guy who's usually pushing around a stroller. And they'll say, "Oh,
Nice.
right. Okay. Yes, I got it." And in fact, I think amongst fellow vendors, I usually get a hard time from you all because at conferences, I'll come in for like a day, or
Hmm.
I'll fly in at I'll leave my house at like 4 in the morning to get to an exhibit hall that opens at 9, and then I'll take the red eye home. And everybody thinks I'm crazy, and everybody thinks the reason I do it is cheap. And I will say, for the first several years, the reason I did it was because I was cheap. But
Hmm.
nowadays, the reason I do it is because it means less time away from the family. So I'll take red eyes if it means a few hours extra, or another bedtime routine together with the kids.
I love it. Love it.
And that's an even more awesome question because that leads me to my first question for you. Second question for you. We are both dads. You've got a
Yep.
couple of kids too. So my question is, if you were to disappear tomorrow, let's not think about why. What are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would give your sons? And you need to keep each one to like a
Ooh.
sentence or a phrase or a thought each.
Okay, one sentence apiece. I give a little context, or you just want the advice
You
with
can give
no background as
context.
to
You can
why?
give
Okay, okay,
context,
okay.
but it needs to be boiled down to something short.
Tangible, something
Yeah.
concise. Okay, all right. Well, I have a lot of thoughts. I think the first one I would say is actually something that, my dad imparted on me growing up. And I'm going to probably butcher the way that he used to say it, but, kind of the gist of it is, if you're going to believe in anything, believe in yourself first, because you're the master of your own destiny. And I think I would impart that on my boys primarily because I think that helped me, develop into who I became today. My dad, I lost at 17, and he was my hero, and I miss him every day. And a lot of the things that he taught me and instilled in me, I think helped shape who I am today, and I hope to kind of impart those on my kids as well. So I think self-belief is a very, very powerful tool. Second one, um, this is a phrase that I've coined. I'll use this one. Getting older is required. Growing up is optional.
Hmm.
Um, and I say that because my wife and some of my friends would always tell me I'm Peter Pan. I'm aging, but I don't grow up. I'm still into some of the same things I was as a kid. Superheroes still excite me. My oldest son is into Legos, and I was a big Lego guy. So I mean, I feel like I'm, back as a 10-year-old sometimes, re-engaging with my kids in some of those things. And I think just not taking things too seriously, being able to laugh at yourself, and stay young inside. And then the last one, Matt, and you and I have talked about this. Time is time is, of course, the most valuable asset, and I think you don't realize that until you start having kids. So I think maybe the last one would be something along the lines of, don't don't squander time. It's later than you think. Um, and it's easier said than done, and it's something that I think you don't realize until you either don't have time with someone that you wish you did, or sitting from the dad's view, my kids don't do the same things that they did 10 minutes ago, right? You never know when it's going to be the last time that they make a certain face or a noise or do something fun. Just kind of living in the moment would be maybe the last one that I would say.
It's a good one. I I think that's a good point that you don't realize that as much until you've had kids, because that happened for me for sure. And I think the most visual or tangible aspect of it is ever since I've had kids, people tell me that all the time. Older people who have had kids themselves say, "Hey, this is going to go really fast, so enjoy it."
Yep.
And I'm sure everybody tells you that, but they're not lying. I've had probably 50 people tell me that since my kids were born. So I appreciate the reminders, and it is very true.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Second one for you, Matt, is I think a lot of folks see a company like Roompact as really successful, and you guys have been around and you work with a ton of schools, but maybe not everybody understands the why and kind of how you got started. I'd love to have you share, why did you start Roompact? Why did you pick this industry? What kind of motivated you to take that leap? Because I believe you started it when you were in college, yes? So I don't know if you ever had like a real job, I'll say. I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of the genesis story.
Totally. It's a fun question. Um, so long story short, I just kind of stumbled into student affairs. And after 10 years, I consider myself a student affairs, not quite professional. How about tangential professional now? I very much feel like I'm part of the student affairs industry, though, and I totally lucked into it. So I've always been kind of a misfit ever since I was a kid. And at some point, I just knew that I didn't really want to have a job. or a boss or just kind of normal things that are part of normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember in college and undergrad thinking, all right, I need to do whatever I can to not get a job, which
Okay.
sounds really, really unambitious, but I was taking it kind of the ambitious route of I need to find a way to make money apart from kind of the normal 9 to 5. And when I was done and I got out, I kind of looked around and I said, all right, well, now's the time to start a company. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I have no responsibilities. Now is the time to take on some risk. So what I did was I did some freelance web development work for about 30 or 40 hours a week. And I found this totally online on some websites. And I remember I eventually accrued like 4 or 5 consistent clients who were giving me projects every week, like a few hours to work on every week. And it totaled up having 4 or 5 clients. And doing that part was horrible because it gave me like 5 bosses and 5 companies to work for. And in addition, I had to go out and look for new jobs just so that I could pay the
Mm.
bills and then do the work on the back end. So that was not a great experience. But the reason I did it was so that I could also by night work on starting a company. So it was always seen as kind of a temporary move for me. I worked 30 or 40 hours a week consulting so that I could pay for groceries, pay for rent, and so on. And then meanwhile, I was working another 20, 30 hours a week trying to come up with a company. And I was the kind of person who I had no ideas. I think I had the ability to start a software company, but I had no ideas. And everyone I met in the entrepreneurial scene in Chicago at the time, they were the exact opposite. They had a ton of ideas, but they didn't know how to build them. And I just felt
Ah.
so weird about that. And it was really frustrating. So I realized that coming up with ideas was kind of a creative process. So I think every day I set a goal for like, come up with like 5 or 10 business ideas. Even if they're like the worst ideas, just put them on a piece of paper to get the creative juices flowing. And then I started to come up with some like decent ones and I would pursue those. What I would do is I'd come up with a new business idea. I'd go out and talk to 5 or 10 people who might pay me for a certain type of software before building anything to do some market research. And then I'd come back and I'd like just think about it more, research it. And if it turned out to be a good prospect, then I would move forward. So I did this in several different industries. One of them was the funeral home industry. I
Hmm.
remember taking a little computer of mine and going to a bunch of funeral homes and demoing them a really terrible PowerPoint presentation and then closing the meeting by saying, would you pay me for this software? And there were actually a few who said, yeah, I would totally do that. But I realized that there were a ton of very big, like $1 billion plus companies who would have just chewed me up and spit me out if I tried to get
Yeah.
into that industry. So I eventually moved on from that one. And then I remember during this kind of creative phase, I remember going for a walk on Lake Michigan with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we were both complaining about our roommates. And we were just kind of talking about it a little bit more. And we said, hey, maybe software could help. So we started to talk to some of our friends, and we realized that people in their 20s would never pay for software to help them with roommates stuff. So then we kind of researched a little bit more, and we found, hey, there's higher education, there's student housing. Maybe we could take roommate conflict and help folks in higher education with that. So we took the idea and then went and talked to about 5 or 10 schools, universities, and colleges in the Chicagoland area. I didn't have a car at the time, so I needed to do whatever I could to get to these places. So I narrowed it down by finding what universities were near like train stops or bus routes, whatever,
Huh.
or that I could like bike to or walk to. So I found them, and everyone I reached out to, I just sent them a cold email and I said, hey, I'm thinking of possibly starting a business in this industry. I know nothing about it. Would you mind giving me 15 minutes? I'll come whenever you want. I'm not selling you anything. I just want to run an idea by you. And that was the first time that I found out that people in student affairs are extremely kind and extremely
Mm.
generous with their time, because I had an awesome success rate for just some random guy And a lot of people let me into their offices, and a lot of people let me give them that terrible PowerPoint presentation. And a lot of them encouraged me to move forward. So then what happened was I felt like I was onto something. So I built a really early version of Roompact, and it was terrible. It was not software that I'm proud of, but it did kind of what it needed to prove like, hey, I can build something. And I brought it to these same people who said they would pay for a software like that. And I was like, all right, it's here. Will you pay for it? It's time. And all of them looked at me and they said, no. And I put my head down and I just said, oh no, what do I do next? So then I kind of went on a nationwide search for people who might be interested in roommate conflict software. And eventually I found a handful of schools. I had a goal for the first year to get into five institutions that actually paid for the software. That meant that they would be bought in and they'd be interested in improving it. And in that first year, we got 6. So barely
Wow.
beat it, the goal of 5. And it was really, my back was against the wall. I didn't think it was going to work out, but it did. Those 6 schools came through, and then I was just fortunate enough to develop amazing relationships with those people. So we would text each other. We had phone calls where they told me what I needed to build. They told me what was wrong, what was right. And I think those early days of a not great software product really instilled the value of having amazing client service. Where our software was lacking, we would make up for just kind of with human power.
Yep.
So, for example, for getting roster information into Roompact, we had no automated or like kind of software tech way of doing that. We basically did it by hand. We said, just
Mm.
send us a spreadsheet. We did it by hand. It took many, many hours of kind of human work, and it was tedious, not fun work. But I think grinding it out in those early days was really important just to instill that value of having amazing support for your clients. And nowadays, I can confirm that people who are much better at building software are building Roompact. They have been for many years. The software is awesome now. We're way beyond that terrible PowerPoint presentation and the early version of the software. So 10 years later, here we are.
I love it, man. I love it. I actually didn't know a lot of that. I mean, I knew bits and pieces, but to hear it again in more detail, hats off to you. You built an incredible company. Um, Everybody in the industry loves Roompact. I always love to hear the grinding story to get there. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it. This is perfect because it's another great segue to my next
Okay.
question for
Okay.
you. I think over the past 10 years, you'll notice in my kind of story, there weren't really any big investors or anything who came in or partners who came in, no venture capitalists, no private equity. And I think I've certainly got Roompact as an entity has certainly got offers for all of those things over the past 10 years. And I'm sure you're in a similar boat. But one of the things that you and I talk about, we riff on, and we get up on soapboxes about is the independence of our companies. So I'm just wondering why you think that independence is so important.
Yeah, I think maybe now it's more important than ever, right? I think we're two of the few companies left that do things 100% bootstrapped in-house. Um, and for me, maybe is not always the same reason for everybody, but I always wanted to do things my way. And I don't know if that's selfish or what, and I don't know if my way is always the best way, but I never wanted to be handcuffed. Similar to you, there have been offers over the years, and for me, it was always about will it allow me to continue to grow, but grow in a way that's organic and that keeps the customer first? The answer to that was always no. Um, Nothing against private equity or venture capitalists or angel investments. They have their place in the software world. For me, it was always about keeping the customer first. And I feel like when you start to take outside investment, you become very metric driven, you become very revenue driven. at all expense, right? Because you've got to not only feed yourself and your team, you've got to feed the investors, and they expect returns. Um, and while they have their place, I just never felt that that was more important than keeping the core philosophy of customer focus. Um, and maybe a little bit of selfishness in that I never wanted to answer to anybody either. Part of the reason I started my company is very similar to yours. I didn't want a boss. I wanted to be able to grow something organically without answering to someone. Um, and while who knows what would have happened had we taken money, maybe we could have grown faster, but I always look at it at what expense. Part of my philosophy as growing a company is I try to put more effort into keeping current clients happy, more effort than getting the next client. And that has worked. And I feel like when you have a model that works, don't change it all that often, don't overhaul it. And by taking some type of outside investment, I feel like it would dilute that particular product and allow me to grow in a different way, or a way that I didn't particularly intend. I don't know if that's the same. There's some of the reasons that you've stayed independent, but it's also a little bit of a pride thing too. Um, I made a lot of early sacrifices to stay independent. Working a full-time job for a long time. In fact, you and some of the other guys used to always ask at conferences if I was still working, and for a long time I was using vacation time to be there. But to me, that was the only way to do it, to be able to keep the lights on at home and still grow a company without handing over control to an outside party.
I dig it. Totally agree. One of the things that I've always thought about is if I started this whole thing because I didn't want a boss, why would I get one through an investor? Now I
Correct.
do,
Yep.
I'm very much accountable to people, my team and our clients. So that relationship is really helpful between all of them, but it's a little bit different with investors. So I completely agree with you.
I love it. And that's something I've always, related to you on, in that, we had a very similar path. You were a few years ahead of me in terms of getting started. But I always felt that I could relate to a lot of the Roompact journey and the trials and tribulations that you had, because it almost kind of seemed like we were on a very, very similar path in the way that we organically grew, the steps that we took, and so forth. So I think that's part of the reason, we've been able to remain close over the last 8 years.
Agreed.
All right, man. Last one. This one's just going to be like a straight up entrepreneurship type question, and maybe it relates to Roompact, maybe it relates to something else. But and if you feel like you've touched on this in your previous answer, because I know you kind of went through some of the trials and tribulations and trying different things before you landed on Roompact, feel free to defer it. I'll come up with another question, but um, I'd love to hear something from you as an entrepreneur that's been doing this a decade or more now, something that you learned along the way that was either very critical in the process of building Roompact, or something that you did totally wrong, and learned from, that's made you a better entrepreneur and leader of an organization since.
All right. So I'm going to need to pick one because there are many things that I've done wrong that I have learned from. And so I will pick one of the top ones that comes to mind. When I was a little bit younger and Roompact was also a little bit younger, I think my main goal was to grow fast. So I still wanted to grow organically, not by taking outside investment, but I was still like pedal to the metal. I wanted us to grow as fast and quickly as possible. I thought we were onto something. We had a great idea. We need to get out in front of anybody else who might have that same idea. And I think it kind of showed. Our team grew really fast. And I think that was the most difficult part for me, was a really fast growing team. So I realized over time that my job kind of transformed from more helping clients and building to helping the team with kind of intercommunication stuff. And I realized when you get a team of like 10 or more people, that I think so much of the overhead goes to communication and making sure everybody's on the same page. And I just really didn't love that about the job at a company that size. And we're smaller now, and we don't really have those communication problems anymore. And we just are really all on the same page. And my job has gotten back to actually doing things for clients, doing things with my colleagues, and it has changed back. And I think it's also just come with wisdom and age, is that you don't need to grow super fast. I think if you just keep your head down, and like you said, we focus on our current clients more than we do on getting new clients. People will hear about it. You'll grow. It'll happen. I'm very much in it for the long game. And I think that also goes along with not taking outside investment, is just when you're in it for the long game, you have really different incentives. There have been many situations in which we could have taken short-term cash for doing something. We could have gotten quick money, but we knew that it would degrade the experience of everyone else beyond that one transaction of getting more money. Even if it's someone who thinks that they would be, would benefit from using Roompact, we'll explain to them when that's not the case. Even if we could get money, we will pass that up just because we're really in it for the long term. So I think the most valuable thing I learned was, and this all relates to kind of some of the advice that you gave earlier, is just time. Time works both ways. Time goes really fast, and thus kind of when you think about a company, if you're willing to put in decades of time into a company, you can accomplish a lot in that time. So I've learned just to keep my head down, enjoy today, and tomorrow there will be growth. Things will get better. And I absolutely love my job. It's amazing, and I love my team that I work with. We're all on the same page about this, and it's just really fun.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, that's 3 apiece. I don't know if you got anything, Matt, you wanna wrap it up with.
Well, Jay, if we have time for it, I have a bonus question for you.
All right, go for it. We got time.
And I hope it makes it past the editing floor. You very well might edit this one out. Here's my question.
Okay.
Everyone in the United States, everyone, maybe Canada and Mexico too, they know that the worst sports fans in North America are Philadelphia sports fans and Boston sports fans. And I'm not even a big sports guy, so even an uninitiated person knows this. Philadelphia fans and Boston sports fans are the worst. So I want you to convince me why Philadelphia sports fans are only the second worst. Let's hear it, Jay.
Only the second worst. Listen, man, I'm going to change the word, right? I'm going to take worst and I'm going to change it to most passionate, all right? And sometimes people easily, well, I guess when you throw things throw batteries and snowballs at Santa Claus, people can confuse those two terms. However, I'm going to stick with most passionate. All right, I'm going to tell you why. I've been a Philadelphia sports fan my entire life. It's a painful life, man. It's a painful life. I started watching Eagles football when I was maybe about 10 or so. So that was, 1995. If you know anything about Philadelphia sports since 1995, it wasn't good. Not good. And there was lots of times where we got just to the cusp. And then we were expected to get there and win. Flat out failure. So it's been a lifetime of disappointment, other than 2017, has been a lifetime of disappointment. And I think a lot of that compounding disappointment coupled with high expectations, it makes people bitter, man. And so when you come into that territory and you're fighting against that home team, people get a little salty and they're very, very passionate about their teams. I've personally have never thrown any food items at an opposing fan. I have seen plenty of it, and I think there are a lot of Philadelphia Eagles fans that give the rest of us a bad name. Does it occur? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would not advise anybody to come to Philadelphia wearing a Cowboys jersey, a Giants jersey, or quite frankly, anything that's not green. Don't do it. Because there are some people that are not so great that give the rest of us a bad name. I just think we're maybe not as obnoxious as the Boston crowd. Nothing against those. We did beat the Patriots in 2017. I still give Steve Fucci a hard time about it. Nothing else to say about it. But I'm going to swap the word from worst to most passionate.
Well, Jay, you handled that very gracefully. So I'll accept. I
But next
appreciate
time I
your
see you, I'm
passion.
going to throw something at you.
Well deserved.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, Matt. Thanks so much for joining. Always great to catch up with you. I hope I get to see you at a conference maybe sometime in the fall. My best to the family, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks so much for taking an hour out of your day.
Likewise, Jay. Thanks for having me. It was great.
All right, my man. I'll catch you soon.